This month on Awesome Artsy Moms, I am in Kempville with Tabitha Valliant. I am so excited to start this interview because Tabitha is a mother of two, she is a painter, and she is also a vice principal. So I'm very excited to get started because I read so much about her before this interview, and the more I read, the more excited I got. So welcome.
Thank you.
Very excited to meet you.
Very happy to be here.
So the first thing I want to know is, when did you launch Valliant Artwork?
I launched Valliant Artwork last summer. It's quite new.
Really? Yes.
Yeah. I finally decided to just take the leap and put some of my art out there to see if any was interested in it at all, whether as gifts or purchasing or just getting some general feedback. So yeah, it's very, very new.
That's so cool.
Yeah, it's only a year old.
I heard that your first love was music, and then it just wasn't doing it for you anymore, and you switched to art, to paint. What happened?
So I was a high school teacher for 16 years, and as a high school teacher, I taught English and music, instrumental music, for 10 years. I've been a musician since I was 4 years old. So music is definitely my first love.
Wow.
But after teaching it for 10 years, I didn't want to come home at the end of the day and do music anymore.
Right.
So I was looking for a different creative outlet. I did a year of ballet and jazz dancing. I am not a dancer. At least
I get that from your expression.
I'm like, it was entertaining, but I'm a dancer, by myself in the kitchen, sort of thing. But so I did a year of that, and then I started painting, and I kind of fell in love with it. It's been a wonderful experience for me.
So when you switched to paints, did you take courses, or are you self-taught?
Completely self-taught, and I don't even know if I have zero technical skills.
Really?
Like none. No, and I know that. Like, someone said to me, "Well, will you teach me?" And I'm like, "Oh, no, don't do what I do," right? Because I would love to take some courses. I just don't have the time. So I read.
Yes.
I read books.
Yes.
I remember watching Bob Ross as a child, painting happy little trees. I suck at landscapes, so that is not happening. But yeah, it's just completely self-taught. My mother is a watercolor painter, so she gave me some suggestions. Watercolor terrifies me. Acrylic terrifies her, so it's kind of entertaining that way that we're both afraid of each other's medium.
Right.
Because I'm like, watercolor. Ooh, I like acrylic because when I make mistakes, I can paint over them.
Yes.
Watercolor's not as forgiving. And so, it just kind of, I just fell into it. And started painting and trying my hand at different things. And
good for you. That's
and I love it.
Yes. Yes, I can tell you love it.
Yeah.
So tell me what inspires you.
Now that's an interesting question. To be honest with you, I started painting because I had an office without windows.
Okay.
So combined with the looking for a different artistic medium, I had this office without windows. And I was like, okay, this is killing my feng shui.
Yes.
I need something bright and bold and on the wall to just, and so I just started painting as a result of that. So I tend to paint things that go with my own decor, such as it is, right? Or my love of color. And so that tends to be my inspiration, or at least when I started it is. I tend to paint really big flowers. That's one of my passions. And yeah, so it just kind of depends. I've gotten into acrylic pouring over the last year, which is a really fun medium.
Yeah,
it's
I saw it when I came
super
in.
fun to do. It's incredibly messy, so it only happens when when I don't have my kids.
Yes.
Because they'll want to do it too, and I've promised them I will do it with them. I'm just not quite there yet. But yeah, so I just keep trying. I'll see different mediums. I'm the person at the art gallery. I was at the Van Gogh exhibit, I think it was a year ago, and I was there with a girlfriend of mine, and we were the people that the security guard kept step away from the paintings, man, because I'm like this.
Yes.
Looking at the, I'm like, what's with the brush strokes on that? So yeah, that's
curious.
how I've learned. I'm very curious, and I love learning, right? Hence the profession as a vice principal. So it's combine those two things together. And I like art because it is always changing, and there's so many different things that you can do with it. So
like compound.
Yeah, like compound. I know. I discovered compound.
That's great. When you're talking about the pouring, I'm just imagining you taking a shower and then you come down and your kids have been experimenting.
And it sounds terrible, but when I do an acrylic pour session, it almost looks like a kill room, right? Because I have shower curtains.
Dexter.
Yeah, a little bit,
Yeah.
right? And so I'll do it because it takes you can't move them once
Right.
once you're doing that particular artistic medium. So things have to sit for at least 24 hours, if not longer.
Yes.
So I have all these shower curtains I put over things and I get it set up. And yeah, so I don't pour all that often. Probably I'd say maybe five times a year. But when I do, I love it. It's super fun. But,
I love the results too. It's cool.
It's neat, and it takes a lot of pre-plan. People are like, "Oh, that's so easy. I could do that," and in theory, they probably could. But it takes a lot of pre-planning, a lot of a lot of playing around with your chemical mixes and your color mixes, and
Right.
before you get you get a lot of stuff that you scrape back off, and it takes a lot of paint. So it's an interesting medium. It's an interesting process for sure. And I watch a lot of YouTube videos.
I can tell you enjoy it just as you're talking
it's
about
fun.
it.
Yeah.
So we've mentioned your children. You have 2 children.
I have 2 children.
Do you ever create?
We
with
do.
them?
Yeah, we paint together. My mother, every time she comes over, she's carrying her bucket of art.
Oh, cool.
And so oftentimes we'll all just sit down together and paint whatever they feel like doing. Yeah, they're both my children are very musical and very artistic. So
Nice.
we definitely sit down together, and when I can get them away from screen time, which isn't
Yes.
you know how that goes.
That battle.
Yes,
Mhm.
it's the never-ending battle. So oftentimes I go and unplug my Wi-Fi.
Yeah. They've learned that trick now. At my house, but,
Mine are 7 and 9. They haven't figured that out.
Oh,
My mother
yes.
hasn't figured that out either, though. So she's like, "Why is the Wi-Fi not working?" I'm like, I don't know. What are you talking about?"
Weird.
Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, we don't paint as much as we should.
Yes.
But my daughter right now is into slime making.
Oh,
That's
yes.
the thing.
We have many containers of slime. in our home.
Many containers. If somebody could come up with something to do with slime
After
other
than
slime
just
is made,
making it,
after
yes.
just putting it in containers,
Yeah.
they would be millionaires.
Yes, they would.
Yeah,
Maybe it's
'cause
us. We have to
We have to
figure
come
it
up with
out.
what the plan is for slime. I like it.
So how, other than slime, how has motherhood impacted your art?
That's a really great question. I think being a mom, you become very cognizant of time, right, and the passage of time, and how incredibly valuable time is. So I think that has definitely impacted my art in terms of making time for it. I tend to paint from 10 p.m. till midnight.
Wow.
To 1 8 and it's funny because I'm like, I know the lighting is bad. I know the lighting's terrible, but that's when I seem to be able to carve out the time.
Yeah.
So that has impacted it. It also has forced me. My kids have certain likes and dislikes. So I've done the unicorn paintings and I'm working on a Batman painting because the unicorn painting is done, and so that definitely impacts it. I think too, creating things in general. As a mom, you've done the biggest creation you're ever going to do, but that feeling of fulfillment when you create something, right? And somebody asked me once, like, is art relaxing for me? It's not.
Really?
I don't actually find when I start a painting, I think way too much about it. I'm a thinker, so I think a long time before I actually sit down and do it, and I kind of have it all planned out in my head. But I realized it's not that it's not relaxing. I guess it's just, it can be anxiety producing for me because I'm obsessed with it. Right. I used to actually have my easel in my bedroom, and I had to take it out because I just be lying in bed and looking at the painting and looking and thinking it through, and I'm like, okay, this is not healthy.
You want it to be perfect.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And so learning to let go, which as a mom is super important.
Yes.
Right? That whole, you do not strive, as a mother, you cannot strive for, there is no such thing as perfection.
No, there isn't. Yeah.
Right? But I think when you become a mom, that certainly drives that home, and it's like, okay, we strive for excellence, not perfection.
Right.
And just coming to terms with that, for me, because I was a perfectionist, still am probably. So having to realize that, you know, it's not going to be perfect, and realizing when a piece is done.
Mm-hmm.
And that's got to be one of the toughest things for me. I've touched up paintings when you're on the wall. Like I'm somewhere.
Just walking by.
Yes. I'm like, oh wait. And I'm like, okay, I
it's
gotta
not done.
I gotta walk away. Like, yeah. So now I'll finish them now, and I'll spray them and seal them and stuff, and be like, okay, they're done. That's it. Because so yeah, in a lot of ways, learning to let go, which is equally important for me as a mom, right?
Mm-hmm.
That way. And my kids are in a tough situation as an educator. I deal all day with young people, and so my patience sometimes at the end of the day for my own kids, which is unfortunate, and it's something that I'm aware of and I'm always working on.
Mm-hmm.
And I've said to both of my kids, you know, sometimes mommy's patience at the end of the day is done.
Yes.
And so, I'm sorry about that. And so you need to call me out on it.
Yeah.
If I'm not being as patient as I should. That's kind of just part of life, right? And so I have to be aware of that and more cognizant of that.
Mm-hmm.
And that has definitely fed into my art in terms of trying to be more patient with myself.
Right.
When things aren't going the way I want them to.
Absolutely.
Right, and that idea, I really think that art has helped me in terms of having a growth mindset. That it's okay to screw up. It's okay if it fails.
Mm-hmm.
That was just my first attempt in learning, and I've always said that as an educator, but never really as an artist. I certainly didn't as a musician.
Mm-hmm.
And so moving to visual art for me was like, okay, it's all right if this didn't go quite the way I wanted it to, because you know what, I can paint over it. And I've painted over entire campuses. I've been like, oh, let's start again, that's no good.
But that's good that you can do that.
It's not always easy, right, because you become emotionally attached to pieces and emotionally invested. But yeah.
Yes. You were saying that's what you liked about acrylic, was that you could just
I
paint
love
over
that.
whatever.
Yes. Yeah.
If it's not working.
It's not working. And if you sit and look at it for a while and you're like, oh, that's wrong.
Yes.
I'm gonna fix that. Yeah. So that's what I like about acrylic. Now it's a little harder when you get into the different mediums.
Mm-hmm.
And you start adding
Like
stuff
compound.
like compound. Yeah, I'm like, oh, this is going to be interesting.
Yes.
But
that's
okay.
good. That's a letting go for sure.
Yeah, well,
compound. I mean.
Yeah. So it's and I mean I love doing things with glass beads and the different and the muds, and I just love it. Yeah, it's super fun.
Nice. I feel the passion.
Yeah, it's there. Now I just need to find about 12 more hours in a day.
Yes.
Yes.
That's the challenge.
It is, for sure. Yeah.
So you've been through a lot of changes.
Lots, yeah.
And I'm just wondering, has your creativity helped you manage those changes? Do you think?
Absolutely, yeah. So, gosh, now 6 years ago, I lost half my body weight, which was a major change in my life. And I started a sequence of other changes.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that just sort of all of those changes, you start to you start to really think about what you want your life to look like,
mm-hmm.
how you want to go about your day, and I kind of was like, okay, I had when my daughter was 2 months old, I broke my leg and my ankle, and I spent a lot of time. I was immobilized for 4 months, and that period of time really led me to sort of seek out these other avenues in terms of art and other artistic releases, and all of those different changes for me, it did really it set off a whole sequence of other changes
mm-hmm.
in my life, and all have been positive. Like, I think everything happens for a reason.
Yes,
I really do believe that.
Like that.
And it's neat because now I'm in a place where things have just finally, they're settling down a little bit. I mean, they'll change again. Life is always like that, right?
Yes.
It's a roller coaster, which is great. Otherwise, it would be boring. But yeah, it's the painting has definitely helped me move through those changes in terms of realizing the person that I want to become.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we're always in a state of becoming. We're always in a state of changing.
Mm-hmm.
If we stop doing that, then we reify and we're no longer developing as people, and I don't think that that's particularly healthy. But that all comes from the educator part of me, right? Which is that whole growth mindset,
mm-hmm.
lifelong learner, all of those things.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah, it's part of who you are as a person.
So, and it's interesting because I watched the art. I kind of looked back at the pieces that I created when I first started painting, and you can definitely see a transition in my art where that I've actually, the pieces have become lighter in color. Right, when I first started painting, things were kind of dark, but I was coming from a place of darkness.
Right.
And so now it's moving towards that color, which has been really fun.
I love that. As an art therapist, when people have many pieces and we do an art review and you can see all of the transformations, and it's so exciting.
Yeah, it really is. And it was funny because I didn't actually notice it, and until I put a series that I have on the wall, and I could see, I was like, whoa. And you can see this whole movement, and I was like, yeah, okay, there it is.
Yeah. It validates.
That's right, and it was, and definitely to a better place, right? Which is that's what we all want. At the end of the day, we're all just trying to be happy.
That's right.
Yeah.
So I mentioned before you're a vice principal.
I am.
And I was really impressed reading about your peace circles that you had initiated at the school that you were at, and I wondered, and I think you kind of answered that a little bit. I was wondering if your painting had become sort of a meditation for you, which I don't think it has.
Well, it's interesting.
Anxious.
Sometimes it does. It depends on what I'm painting, right?
Okay.
Acrylic pouring is very meditative,
Right.
Because it's a process.
Right.
The other, if I'm painting like a large flower or something like that, those don't tend to be as meditative because I take a long time.
Okay.
Because I don't have any technique. It takes me quite a long period of time to paint some of those pieces. I don't tend to knock off a painting quickly. So what's interesting is that I have a lot of art in my office, and that has become very meditative for both me and some of my students, and it becomes an interesting conversation with the students in terms of the different colors and the different mediums, and so I find that sometimes having all of those, and I have pieces of art that are done by my children, and I have a bunch of my own art because I've run out of places to hang it, and but it's really neat to see how kids respond to color and how kids respond to different types of art, and oftentimes I'll have a student who will come into my office and they'll be escalated for whatever reason, and just moving them to that difference, like, okay, well I'll be like, hey, do you like to draw? And so we'll sit down and we'll start coloring, we'll start drawing, and then we'll start having those conversations. And it might take a long time. We might be coloring in silence for 20 minutes, 30 minutes. I think the longest I've ever gone, I had one in there for an hour, and then finally they start, right? And it works beautifully. It does, in terms of that, just getting them into a different mindset, right? And having them do something other than what is causing them anxiety.
Do you know what I found is oftentimes when people are like children or teenagers, if I have groups, they hum. They get to a certain level where they've relaxed and they just start humming, and it happens all the time.
It does.
I find it fascinating. I can't explain it, but I find it fascinating.
Yeah, it's that. Well, I think they go within themselves, right? And but you watch them. You're right. They do hum, and they start. You can see them de-escalate and start coming down. Yeah. And I have buckets of Lego in my office for the same purpose. Right? If I can't get them with the coloring, I'll get them with the Lego. Yeah. And they'll sit on my floor and we'll do Lego and we just focus on the Lego. We don't talk about anything else. And they'll start to, or they just chatter their way through it too, right? Yes. And it's a pretty powerful, those are pretty powerful tools in terms of having kids be aware of what's going on with them. Yes. Right. And that's, at the end of the day, we're always looking for a function of behavior. It's there's no such thing as a bad kid. It's just unfortunate circumstances or something's going on in their life or whatever it is. So I tend to I bring the art to that as certainly as a tool for de-escalation. Yeah, and I've used it quite a bit. Even just having kids draw, and sometimes kids will draw out what's going on with them, and you can have those conversations, and it's very, very powerful.
Yes, it is. They're lucky to have you.
Well, thank you.
I don't know how many VPs sit and draw for an hour with the student.
Well, sometimes I'm in and out.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. There's oftentimes other things but yeah, I've had students, students on the spectrum in particular. Oftentimes drawing is how you get information, right? Because become very much enclosed. They're, the world around them is so overstimulating, and it's just to get them to kind of focus on something that is soothing for them.
Yes.
So I think it's something that we are becoming more aware of as school administrators. We're spending a lot of time looking at the works of like Stuart Schenker and self-regulation.
Yes.
And so when you start to look at the different techniques that they talk about and use, it's you can see where things like art fit into that beautifully.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's pretty powerful. Yeah. And I'm lucky that I get to do those sorts of things. And I was sitting in a kindergarten classroom last year painting, and we were painting tulips. I think, and as I was sitting there painting with at this little table, I'm all hunched down, and I thought, I have the best job in the world.
Right. And doing flowers, that's your thing.
I'm like, I'm painting tulips, this is great, And the kindergarten teacher, we hung it up, the kindergarten teacher later framed it. I was like, you did not need to,
Yes, everybody gets framed.
And then a whole little posse of them brought it down to my office, and it was very, it's pretty awesome. Yeah,
that's really sweet.
But it's not very many other jobs where you get to do that. Right?
No.
Now I don't get to do that all the time, but
Yeah. Some perks.
Yep, definitely, and there's definitely it's definitely a perk. It's funny because if I'm having a moment or having a rough day, because I'm only a human being,
yes,
I find I will meander down. The kindergartens are always painting, so I meander down to I'll be like, what you guys doing? And so, I do go to art as a way to recenter myself. For those
it's a great
quiet
container.
Moments. It is, yeah. It's just, I'm not always cognizant of it at the time as to why I'm doing it.
Right.
Right? But then you reflect back and you're like, oh yeah, I ran away to the kindergarten classroom.
Now when they see you, they'll be like, oh, there she is. She's
having a
bad day.
Yeah, having a bad day. I'm down here in kindergarten. Yeah, so it's neat.
So what would you say to the moms out there who don't do art because they don't see themselves as artists? They say, I'm not an artist, I couldn't create, I just do stick figures. What advice would you have for those moms?
Do it anyway, right? It doesn't matter. Art is so subjective that whether you think it's good or bad is irrelevant, really. It's not about whether it's good or bad, it just is. Right? So you just do it. And if it doesn't turn out, it doesn't turn out. Right? If you enjoy it. And it's funny because I talked to another artist. We were chatting about the fact that we don't always find painting relaxing. But there is this compulsion to do it. It's that compulsion to create. Right? Whether we bake or we do crafts or whatever that compulsion is to create, I think it is so cathartic and so important. And really, at the end of the day, if you don't like it, paint over it. Right? Sometimes it's about the process. Sometimes it really is about the journey. Yeah. So just jump in and do it. I never, ever in a million years thought anybody would buy a painting.
Your paintings?
Yeah, any one of my paintings. And I've sold, and I mean, I don't sell a ton.
Right.
But I've sold enough to buy more art supplies.
Right.
And at the end of the day, that's fantastic. And it's not even about the money, it's just about that validation that somebody else liked what you were doing. Yeah. Right? Which is really cool. So I would say create no matter what. Just do it. I still don't call myself an artist. I struggle calling myself that.
Really?
And it's only been over the last year, I would say, that I've been more comfortable with that label. And it's like, what? I think we all in our own way can be artists. It's just you just got to find that creative outlet that works for you, whether it is knitting or whatever it is. It's it's fun, and if you enjoy it and you want to paint, then paint. Right? And it's really neat to see what's going on in society right now. If you look at these paint nights and all of these other things, I think that it's really opening up possibilities for people to try painting. Yes. Right? I tried to do a paint night once, and I was digging paint out of the garbage can because it wasn't quite done yet. I was like, okay, maybe me painting in like a 2-hour block is probably not a good idea.
I was so stressed right now.
I'm like, I have to finish it. If I don't finish it, I won't have paint at home that matches. I gotta finish. I was like, okay, maybe paint nights aren't my thing, but that's okay.
You can do your own type of paint night.
And we do. I get together with a girlfriend of mine, and we haul out a couple canvases, and we're like, okay, what are we gonna try?
Yes, exactly.
And so we do our own version of a paint night, and she has taught me to kind of let go a little more and be like, it's done. I'm like, but like, okay, it's done.
Yeah.
Right, and just that ability to walk away, and that is the advantage of those things like paint night, because they are done in 2 hours.
Yeah.
But yeah, I wasn't the only one picking paint out of the garbage can, in all fairness. But it was like, oh, I forgot to paint the sides. I need to. Yeah, there you go. So
it's good that you weren't alone at the garbage. That's
no,
good.
it was nice that I had a friend. There was
Yeah,
only
so
2 of us left, and we were both still. And I said to her, she was a friend of mine, I'm like, maybe paint nights aren't really meant for us. I'm thinking
Paint weeks.
Yeah, we need a paint month or something. We just need studio time. I'm not sure what, but yeah, I don't think trying to paint this in a 2-hour block is really going to work for me. So it's every now and then I get a weak moment, be like, maybe I should. And I'm like, no.
Yeah.
It's, I know it's not going to work. So I'm just better here at home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In the comfort of your home.
In the comfort of my home, I put on some music and off we go. And it's interesting because I find the marriage of music and art really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And I've kind of been exploring more that whole field of seeing in color.
Yes.
Because I have always tended to see music in color.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm really fascinated by that. And I want to try and do more of that. But, I love abstract stuff. I'm not a realism painter, and I never will be. I have incredible respect for people who can do it. I cannot. And I know I can't. And it's because I'm too much of a perfectionist, I'll drive myself crazy.
But you know what? You should try blindfolding yourself.
Yeah.
Blindfold yourself, put some music that you really like, set out your paints, and then put the blindfold on and just see.
And just see what happens.
You'll be amazed at how awesome it looks, even though you didn't even see it.
Yeah.
Just
It would
going
be
with the
fun.
music. Yeah.
That would be fun.
It is. It is. It's very liberating because you can't see it.
you
So
can't
you
see
can
it.
always blame, I was blindfolded, I couldn't see, right?
Yeah.
So can we see some of your pieces
You can.
and hear about your process? I'd love to hear
Sure.
about how they're done.
So this is an acrylic pour, which I don't know if you'll be able to see it or not with the glare, because I've got, that's not too bad. There we go.
See it?
This is a fairly recent acrylic pour that I did. And it's interesting because you can only control the outcome so much on an acrylic pour. Process involves, obviously you prep a canvas, right? You've got a gesso on there and a white, you actually use a white paint as well, which you can just kind of see coming through. The paint is mixed. There's always a mixture of paint. Some people use silicone. They'll use like a treadmill silicone. Some people are using WD-40. So it just kind of depends on what you find works well for you. When I first started painting these, I was actually using personal lubricant, which was really funny. Because I had to go to Shoppers Drug Mart to buy silicone-based lube. And I said to the guy, I'm like, you're not going to believe this, but it's actually for art.
She's like,
Yeah, sure it is.
Sure
I
it
was
is.
like, yeah.
It's for my friend.
So a few of my first pieces were literally lube art. Because I couldn't find silicone anywhere else. I've since graduated to other things.
Nice.
It's it's coconut hair serum actually works really well too. So it's a huge trial and error of mixing paint
I
with
love the texture.
with different substances. This one is a pouring medium. There's a pouring medium in here, and I think I used a coconut hair serum. And I'm trying to remember what else went in. So picking out a series of colors. And mixing them up, and then you have to let them sit for a little while, obviously get the air bubbles. I like, once it's poured, I think this was a swipe actually, so I poured it and then I use a trowel and swipe across it.
And do you go from the center, or do you...
You can. It just depends. It depends. It depends on the piece. Sometimes I'll take, like if it's a dirty pour, you take a cup and you put the cup on the canvas.
Oh yes.
So you have it flipped. I've done some really big canvases with pours, which that is really tricky to do and incredibly messy. This one was this was a straight pour, so I poured the paint on the canvas and then I swipe it with a trowel.
Very cool.
And then I take a butane torch to it, which is always entertaining, but that's what helps create that texture. And there's always And it's always fun because I let them dry on my dining room table, and occasionally, I knew it was going to happen sooner or later. One of the cats just right on. I was like, great.
On this one?
Nope, not on this one. On another one I have. It's actually sold. But it had these 2 beautiful green paw prints that were all over the house. It's like, and it was this really fun painting, and I was like, dang, I fixed it. But it's, it was
it's
one of those. And it's old, so obviously it was okay. But yeah, so that's the acrylic pouring. And it never turns out the same way twice, right? It's, I mean, you can't, it's always very, very different in terms of the style that you end up with and the look. But most of my pours right now are actually at French Bistro. There's actually, I think all of them are, give or take. Yeah.
And is that your first exhibit?
No, I've had things hung at the Municipal Center.
Okay.
For the last couple of years. So I've hung them there. I've hung them at South Branch. Where else have I had them? That's probably it right now. Yeah. And then obviously I did the 416 art show in North Grenville Arts Guild. So yeah, which was that was my first show where I had the most paintings on display at once. I think I had like 35 paintings or something.
Are they pretty much that size?
No, they're all over the map in terms of size. I had right down to teeny tiny little. Okay. Yeah, it just kind of depends on. I did a whole series of these these colors. And so that's like a really small pour. Yeah. So they were all over the map in terms of size. Yeah. So I mean that one's really small, but
I'm very drawn to the pours because I love the freedom of not how you just let it do what it needs to do, and then the mixed colors. I love the colors.
Yeah, and that's the thing, and it's you move the painting around a fair bit, but if you move it too much, you can mess it up, and so it's. The silicone causes the paint to start to separate, and so that's why you end up with so much that you can only control so much, right? Yeah. And I think that's why it's probably a good medium for me, because it's that loss of control. It's that letting go. It's like, okay, I can't force this. Yeah. So you just kind of have to let it be and hope that it dries the way that you envisioned. That it was kind of just like, oh, I don't know if that's going to go. So that's been a real process for me, but I love doing it. It's true with the pours. It's one of those things where once you start creating them, it's very addictive, and so you kind of have to pace yourself a little bit too, right? Because you don't need 50 canvases lying around. I'm like, do I really need this many pours? I don't, It's so, and it's funny because I tend to be drawn to really big canvases, so that can get costly after a while too, right? And not everybody can afford or has the space for a really big canvas. So that's something that I try to take into consideration. It's interesting because I don't tend to paint with an eye to selling. I tend to paint with an eye to keeping these things. They're sort of my things, but you start to balance it out a little bit. And when I was preparing for the show, I was like, okay, I need to have some smaller pieces because it's just the sheer cost of the paint and the canvas and all those sorts of things, right? In terms of trying to recoup your costs, not everybody can afford a big canvas. So I was telling you, when I sat out some canvases, I realized that there was a progression. Right. And this would be the strongest example. So I painted this, and I'll hold it up once I see the date on it. When did I paint this one? 2016. Okay. So I painted this in 2016, and they were all in 2016.
Hold it while you.
So these were sort of the first two. I call this the Nevermore series.
Okay.
I'm not particularly adept at painting birds, but it is what it is. So this was the first one. And then over the progress of several months, I ended up moving towards this one. Right. And I noticed when I put it together, when I painted the third one, and so when I painted the third one, I could see that the light in it is getting bigger through the progression, and the bird itself is getting blacker and not quite as haggard looking. Yes. And so it was a real catharsis for me, and it was a real moment of whoa, right? Like, this is really interesting. Like, what's going on here? And what was even there's actually a fourth one that was purchased, and it had 2 ravens in it. Okay. It was called Conspiracy Attempt, because the collective noun for a group of ravens is a conspiracy. And so I had 2, the English teacher and me, right? Yes. Yeah, so it was blue. It was a lighter shade of blue. with the two ravens. And so it was just this really interesting progression, and I've no desire to go back to painting another one. I was like, that's it, it's done.
You're done with that theme.
Yeah, I'm done with that theme, and it's...
I think it's cool because this one, you're being pushed back, you know, there's like this like, oof, and then that one you've got your wings, and then you're off.
Yeah, and then you're just off, right? And it was, I mean, 2016 would have been the first year that I was a single mom. 15? Well, no, it was heading to the second year. I don't know, first year. I separated in 2015, so it was January 2015 I separated, but so it was part of sort of the first year of being alone.
Yes.
And I think that this was part of the process for me in terms of coming to terms with that. So it was neat. I mean, it's
very cool.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't think it's particularly brilliant in terms of artwork, but it's it just kind of shows that progression, right, in terms of that. What art can do for you.
I love the symbolism of it.
Yeah.
It's so powerful when you put it into a symbol. Yeah. And then you see it progress, you know? It's beautiful.
So this past winter I decided I was going to be all about texture. So, and I have a habit of naming paintings. This is called The Second Circle of Hell. I have no idea why. It's in Italian though. Secondo Terrio dell'Inferno. Which my Italian is terrible, so I apologize. But and it's all textural. Yeah, so I think actually I haven't had this one in my office yet. I think this is going to go in my office because it is so textural and fun. And
so, what was your process for this? How did you end up layering this?
So this is a combination of crystal beads and then molding compound. And so it just it was, I think it was a black canvas. No, it was not. It was a white canvas. So I painted it black. This was actually, I had painted over a painting. Oh, okay. There's another completely different painting underneath here. Yeah, and I didn't like it. And so this is sort of my test canvas for playing around with texture and color. And So my process was I took some colors that I liked, and I just started with I wanted to try all the different compounds that I had, right? So some of it is a string gel, I think in the red is a string gel, and then there's glass beads in the goldy bronze, and then it's a black sand that's in the silver. So just kind of trying to get a feel for those different things that you can mix in with paint.
Yeah, how rough it can get.
And again, this is me having no technique, so I just play until I get something I think I like.
That's some pretty impressive playing right there.
I'm looking forward to that one in my office, I think, which I'm not sure if I should have something in my office called The Second Circle of Hell, but because the symbolism on that might be a bit foreboding and stressful. But it's interesting because that was the second attempt I had at using different compounds, and ironically, this was my first. Yeah, which is a mud.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, this one doesn't. It's mud and then glass beads coming down from the top. So that whole ombre kind of effect.
And what did you name this one?
What did I name this one? It's called Wintrosa, which is an odd. Yeah, Wintrosa. It's a combination of words.
I love this color.
So yeah, it's a really neat painting. Very calming, but again, it was that attempt at different textures. So the only thing in it that's not textured is actually the middle. Okay. Is the middle of it.
Right. This center part.
Yeah. So that one actually was the fastest painting aside from a pour that I think I've ever done because I was done it in an evening. So I decided to pick up some board and wanted to paint with board. Okay. So it's just like a.
Okay.
Yeah. Melamine, whatever it is. And this has a lot of movement going on in it. Movement. And honestly, this was just about color and movement. And I called it Allegro because it is all about that brisk, fast-paced movement. And a lot of my pieces actually have musical names, musical or Italian names, which is that whole musician in me. They're either coming from an English teacher point of view or a musician perspective, which I thought was kind of interesting. But again, this was just playing with color and brushstrokes and trying to learn how to do different brushstrokes and different techniques. All of my art is really experimental. It's
which is great. That's
I mean it's I do plan some things out, but generally the abstract pieces are very, very, very experimental. The flowers are a little bit more mapped out. and I spend a little bit more time thinking about those, and I might do now. When I first started, I didn't. I just started painting. Now I tend to sketch things out a little bit more, which is, you know, it's that process of growing, right? Where you're like, oh, I can sketch this out first and see if I like it, and as opposed to just starting to slap paint onto a canvas.
That's right.
So that's been a fun process for me, even just the whole drawing piece. It's tricky for me. I have chronic tendonitis in my wrists.
Oh.
So this is why it takes me a long time generally to do pieces of work, because my wrists will swell up and get sore.
And is that new?
So I've had it since I was 16 years old.
Oh.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So it really impacted sort of my abilities as a musician. It's significantly changed sort of my life course. I was going to be a professional musician and realized that when I was 17 years old, I was doing physiotherapy every day. I traveled to gigs with a cooler of ice. I was taking anti-inflammatories on a regular basis, and was contemplating either bone lengthening surgery or cortisone. And I was just like, this is crazy. The cortisone was going to give me about a 10-year musical career. And I was like, that's not enough.
Yeah.
I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
So at that point, I just I took a break from music. I went back and did my music degree afterwards, but my music degree is in composition as opposed to performance.
Right.
So, I just kind of shifted. So I'm very, very careful as to I know how much I can and cannot do in terms of my hands and my wrists. And so that's why it does take me longer to do the fine detail paintings as opposed to the abstracts. The abstracts I can do pretty easily, but the other ones it's a longer process for me because I have to take breaks. So,
yes, lots of breaks.
Lots of breaks, yeah.
Rest.
So, but I'm aware of that, and you become aware of your limitations, and you know what you can do, and so you work around it. It's you can't let it stop you. It's not. It is what it is, right? This is actually one of the very first flowers that I painted. The first one I've sold. It's gone. But this was the one I painted for my office. So the big, I wanted the big, colorful, and it was supposed to be a poppy, and it went awry. And so I looked at it for a long time, and I was like, it's not a poppy, it's something else entirely. So again, and this took me months to paint, just lots of trial and error, and I'm like, oh, I need a shadow there, and starting to think about, where's the light coming from? Is there light? I'm not really sure. It's still one of my favorite pieces. It tends to travel around. I don't have it all the time. It goes to South Branch, it goes to the municipal center, it goes to my office, it comes home for a while. It's
I like the movement again. You have that movement.
Yeah, and I always have, for whatever reason, when I'm painting flowers, I always have, I'm drawn to this movement in the background.
And everything's coming from the center, whereas some of your other pieces, they're going across, or they're going up or down, or this one's like...
Yeah, and it was one of my first pieces. It was really fun. I did a beautiful dandelion as well. That I may never ever do again. It took me so long to do it.
First and last dandelion.
Yeah, it's. I was going through a black canvas face, right? So I wanted to try and do a white dandelion on a black canvas, and it was a dandelion seed. So painting each one of those individual little, I was like, oh yeah, I don't know about this. You get halfway through a painting and you start to regret it, right? You're like, maybe no, but I finished it, and
that's great.
Yeah,
you finished it.
I finished it, and I'm actually contemplating doing another one. Just because I've had a number of people who have expressed interest, they would like one, and I'm like, okay.
And we have a festival, dandelion festival. You could sell a whole bunch.
And you're right, we do have a dandelion festival. I don't know if I can produce that many for the dandelion festival, but we'll see. Time will tell.
Yeah.
So, but I'm still drawn to the big flowers. I'm working on a giant. I think it's a peony right now. You can just slide that. It's some days I like it, and then some days I declare it a mess. So it just kind of depends on the day.
So how? Because that was one of your first. So
and this is my latest. So I started this March break. So as you can see, it's not really I'm making progress, but it's slow. It's a slow one, and I keep looking at it, and I want to change things. And so, yeah.
I can see how you've mastered the shading and the light.
I'm working on it. I don't know if master is the right word, but it's coming along. Yeah.
Yes.
And the background will probably have as much movement as that. I'm just not. The background's not done yet, so we'll see what happens. It'll be interesting. I'm hoping by this time next year it'll be done.
Yay!
That's right. I'm not in any rush. It is what it is, right? It's a process.
So where can people get or see your art?
Well, they can see my art online. I have a Facebook page, Valliant Artwork, or they can see it usually I have a few paintings at the Municipal Center. I don't right now. And I have quite a few paintings at the South Bank Bistro at the moment. Yeah, in Kempville. So, and if there's a particular piece that they want to see, they can certainly contact me, and I can make arrangements for that. I've done commissions, different colors, for pours. I've done those as well. So if someone is interested in having something specific to match, that's easy enough to do. I've done that for myself. So right. It's that's where they can see my art.
And yet you say you don't consider yourself an artist.
I don't consider myself an artist. I know. But I'm embracing that more and more. As a member of the North Grenville Arts Guild, and I'm the treasurer of the guild, so I'm kind of getting used to saying to myself, yes, I am an artist.
Yes, good.
Yeah, so
good.
It's one of those things, I never really used to think of myself as a musician either. It took me a long time to embrace it. It's like, no, I'm just a music teacher. It's like, no, you're also a musician.
Right.
And getting your head around that concept sometimes and the utterance is important, I think. I think it's hard. The label is a tough one to embrace because we don't tend to always embrace labels. But I think when you're dealing with any kind of creative endeavor, embracing that label is not always a bad thing. So
that's a nice way to end.
Yeah, that's a nice way to